The truth is out there. Maybe it's in here. But what comes after all this? The ET space aliens? Let's remember what Werner von Braun, once in Hitler's group, then coming over to the United States, told Carol Rosin. This is posted originally from November 2021, talking about Ross Coulthart, author of a new book, In Plain Sight, which chronicles a series of mysterious UFO sightings around the world. It details the extraordinary efforts of officials to deny or cover them up. There has been an explosion of UFO initiatives in the past 12 months, including the formation of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research and the launch of the Galileo project. And then there was the Pentagon's groundbreaking report in which it admitted that there were unexplained, unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP incidents, what we call UFOs. However, a new book, In Plain Sight, by award-winning investigative journalist Ross Coulthart, could be one of the most interesting developments yet. Coulthart does not have a reputation for support in the UFO community, but he has long had a desire to address the big question, are we alone? I have always been interested in the subject, mainly because there's such a taboo attached to it. In journalism, there is a real stigma, he said. I can remember editors saying to me, Ross, we don't do UFO stories. I did a lot of stories related to national security and defense. I have spent a good part of at least 30 years, of the last 30 years, covering wars, terrorism, and all the miseries of the world. And many of these contacts I made when I asked them about UFOs, they didn't reject it, hence the idea that they existed. Born in New Zealand, Coulthart was fascinated by the 1978 incident in which a cameraman captured footage of an actual flying alongside a plane over the town of Kaikoura on the country's South Island. And weeks later, authorities attributed to either a planet Venus or a reflection from fishing boats. As a 16-year-old boy, it seems reasonable, so I didn't think much of it, he admitted. But at university, Coulthart secured his first journalistic success by tracking down those involved who assured him that what they saw was a solid object. Fast forward to the 90s, and he had established himself as a journalist working on the Australian investigative TV show Four Corners. After completing a day's filming at an airbase, the crew was invited by their host to have a drink at the hotel bar. Coulthart recalls, after a while he leaned forward and said, "Can I ask you a question? Why doesn't the media ever do stories about UFOs?" I freely admitted that, laughed and said, "Because they're a-holes." He said, "No, that's not it. I wish I could say who that old man was. He was very, very high-ranking officer, one of the highest-ranking people in our military at the time. Hampered by the parameters of the mainstream media, he still managed to convince his bosses to a UAP story in 2011, but it was only because he had been sent to London to interview a rock star that he cancelled and was left with a hole to fill." Coulthart passionately investigated reports of sightings in 1980 near RAF Bentwaters Air Force Base and tracked down Colonel Charles Halt, who claimed to have seen a flying object. He recalled, "We gave it half an hour to air and it just went crazy. The public was very interested, and more importantly, what surprised us was the number of people who called and offered information. I've been contacted from all over Australia saying they've seen a similar object. They were surprised that the media finally reported this story. The good thing for them was that we were not making fun of it, we were treating it with respect." In Plain Sight contains detailed analysis of several sightings, including Coulthart's personal favorite of a man sitting on a lounge chair in an outdoor cinema in South Australia desert when a cylindrical craft appears. The moviegoer claimed he could see light inside the windows of the craft. Coulthart began the book after freelancing and throwing off the shackles of dismissive editors and says the Pentagon's recent admission that something is out there has been a really positive development. He explained there is essentially a single line parroted by any Five Eyes nations, the UK, US, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. If you ask, are UFOs real? They don't answer the question. They say there is no national security issue with UAPs and they pose no threat to flight safety. But in July of this year, everything changed dramatically. Anyone can read the report. It says very, very clearly that UFOs are a threat to aviation safety and that they are a potential threat to national security. It's a complete turnaround. No one in the Pentagon is explaining why they did this, but I think, and they told me, it's because they realize the game is up. They must finally clarify what they know. In his book, Coulthard examines the connection between UFOs and nuclear facilities. In Plain Sight begins with a 1991 story of a woman named Annie Farinaccio who had gone to a party at a US base in Australia's remote Northwest Cape. She was offered a ride back into town by two policemen, but she never forgot what she saw as they drove. Seth Coulthard, Annie was sitting there petrified. She looked up from the windshield and screamed as there was this giant triangular craft with lights hovering right overhead as they drove 100 miles an hour down this road. In the blink of an eye, it was up to 1,000 feet, and then it fell to the left side of the car. By this time, she's begging the police to let her back into town, and then she jumped back to 1,000 feet. It jumped back to 1,000 feet instantly and landed on the right side of the car. We're talking about the UFO. The base housed very low-frequency transmitters, which, in the event of war, would send signals to U.S. nuclear submarines. Annie was visited by American officials, taken back to base and told that she had seen a weather balloon, even though the craft looked nothing like a weather balloon. The book records another incident in Russia, in which weapons in a nuclear silo were mysteriously armed, ready to launch, without any input from the officers. Coulthard said they were panicked. The information seems to show that no matter what your security systems are, and they can be hacked by these UFOs. If it's intelligence of some kind, it seems to be sending a message. It seems to be expressing something about the use of possible misuse of nuclear weapons. The book also features a story of teacher Andrew Greenwood from Clayton South, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia. Along with his high school students, he saw a metallic disc appear in a cloudless sky. Greenwood spoke to local media before going gaga, said Colbarth, "This is where things really get awful." 2 weeks after the incident, he knocks on the door of his private house. There in the doorway is a man in uniform, a senior officer, and the other gentleman is an official, perhaps a police officer or an intelligence officer, most likely. Andrew is still angry about what they did. They threatened him bluntly and said, "If you talk about what you saw again, we'll make sure you lose your job. We'll say you drank as a teacher." Andrew has no reason to lie about it, and more importantly, what he says he saw is backed up by 167 witnesses, all on record. At last count, it really is the most unusual case. More revelations have been uncovered by Coulthard, including suggestions of recovered non-human craft. Sources claim the US and Russia have facilities where they are stored, but Coulthard says he's generally skeptical of such claims without having seen evidence. That's the biggest problem I have. Governments go to great lengths to keep secrets, and I would think that if the United States government had such secrets, they would have been leaked by now, and they haven't been, he said. But when you look at the records of the US government, that's why I called my book In Plain Sight. The evidence is there in plain sight. There are files from the CIA that show it was working with the US Department of Defense to recover what the documents referred to as flying saucers from Nepal and Afghanistan. Along with the book, Coulthard has produced a UFO documentary and has received an encouraging level of support from colleagues in the media and from the public. The response was simply overwhelming. I've never had, he says, a response in my career like I've had with this, Coulthard said. It was overwhelming. I'm exhausted every day. I wake up and there's literally 300 to 500 emails, people telling me about shows, people offering me information. It's like we've opened a wound and all of the reality pours out. The main purpose of the book, however, is to overcome the fog. According to Coulthard, it's almost as if sections of the media do not want to admit they fell asleep at the wheel, he continued. The media is failing here. The media is locked into the paradigm that it has irrationally been encouraged to take. Considering the CIA and the US Air Force in the 1960s. The CIA decided to suppress the UFO stories. I don't know why, but they claim it was because they were worried that people reporting UFOs would get in the way of people giving early warning of a Russian ICBM intercontinental ballistic missile landing in the United States. It's an absurd argument that they wanted to prevent people from jamming the phones of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, with sightings. Is just ridiculous. For a man of words, Coulthard concludes by describing his complex subject appropriately succinctly. While he has not yet been able to learn everything that governments and security agencies know about UFOs, he is clear why the subject has been deemed a fool's hobby. He said, "We have been manipulated, we have been deceived." A great effort has been made lately, officially and unofficially, to believe in extraterrestrial life and their visits to our planet, and all this is presented in an intimidating way, something like the imminent or the coronavirus threat. However, how far the Pope, when he has been chosen for the position, had said that he would baptize an extraterrestrial alien. Pope Francis says he would baptize aliens. Who are we to close the doors, he says. In any case, the reports are becoming more and more frequent, and yes, they can somehow ridicule the issue. On the other hand, this whole supposedly seven-sealed secret seems like they want to achieve something else, and certainly something else. What? Remember the issue with the Blue Beam Project? Dr. Carol Rosin is an industry executive. When she first met Werner von Braun in February 1974, it was then that 3 years was before his death. He died in 1977. Werner von Braun revealed to Carol Rosin the hidden agenda of NASA. Inviting her into his office, Werner von Braun surprised Rosin by explaining how everything pointed to a one-way road to planetary control under a tyrannical world government. According to what Dr. Rosin said, Werner von Braun made a very big revelation to her. He said that a secret multinational power, which already exists, will try to permanently take control of the planet through an extraterrestrial invasion hoax. The space weapons, according to Werner von Braun, later to be known as Star Wars program, were to be promoted as a shield against Russian designs, then as defense against rogue terrorist nations, then as a protection from asteroids and meteorites, and finally they would be presented as protective measures against an extraterrestrial threat. So what is the next step for the new order of things, the Blue Beam Project? Yes, let's read it again. A topic that gives many answers to the key and vital questions that will arise very soon in front of us. So everyone and everything is being mobilized, it appears, in this direction, which I believe will be the final stage of the plans of the authorities. And what will happen next? They will simply be revealed. They say from the pages of Harvard and Galileo Project, interstellar xenia implies that we should welcome autonomous visitors. Interstellar, that is philanthropy. We should welcome space visitors, even if they incorporate hardware with artificial rather than natural intelligence reaching us from afar. Our technological civilization could benefit greatly from the knowledge it would glean from such encounters. After all, we share the same neighborhood as them. From the topic, be hospitable to alien visitors. So from all the above, your conclusions? Let's go and read the following topic. It has its value in what is called the future of humanity. Rachel, the Elohim, and the Vines. In the early 1970s, a man apparently with serious psychological problems, his first wife had a statement that she suffered from clinical depression. He founded a religious movement, realism or realianism, a type of religion that believes in extraterrestrials and the salvation that will come from them, from their interventions. This guy is called Claude Maurice Marcel Vorichon. Realism teaches that an alien species known as the Elohim created humanity using their advanced technology. An atheistic religion, it believes that the Elohim have historically been perceived as gods. He claims that throughout history the Elohim have created 40 Elohim-human hybrids who have served as prophets preparing humanity for information about their original origins. Among those mentioned as prophets are Buddha, Jesus of Nazareth, and Muhammad, and Real himself being the 40th of the final prophet. Realists believe that since the Hiroshima bomb in 1945, humanity has entered an apocalyptic age in which it is threatened with nuclear annihilation. He argues that humanity must find a way to harness the new scientific and technological development for peaceful purposes, and that once this is achieved, the Elohim will return to Earth to share their technology with humanity and lead to a utopia. To this end, the Realians have pledged to build an embassy for the Elohim, incorporating a landing site for their starship. Realians promote a liberal moral system with a heavy emphasis on sexual experimentation, engaged in daily meditation, and hope for physical immortality through human cloning. So the extraterrestrials have chosen a chosen group of human beings, it appears, according to this, to save the planet, and time is running out. So this I've translated for you from a Greek article from the Pelasgian. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.